I used to make magazines, and I don't think I've told anybody this before, even some of my friends. And that's how PolyInnovator began, actually. And I think that this is something that was fun to talk about. I was thinking about it when I saw a job listing on LinkedIn for a magazine in Texas. And I was like, I actually have experience with this. And I'm sure it's not professional experience, but the fact that I have experience going this far back into my life, and I'll explain that in a moment, I thought was super cool. And so I just wanted to share this passion with you because it's fascinating how this evolved. So when you're growing up in the 2000s, you had the family computer. And so it was in my dining room. I remember that. And I spent so much time on there. I think even without internet, I still was able to find things to do. And we had a copy of Microsoft Office. And so I found myself, messing around with PowerPoint. Didn't really do much with Word, but I messed with it. I knew how to use it pretty well, actually. And I actually spent a ton of time in Office Publisher. And Publisher was really interesting because I ended up making like brochures, and I think I messed around with menus too for whatever reason. And one of the things I loved doing was kind of making like magazines and working around this idea of here's like what I would page 1, page 2, page 3, and just kind of coming up with some cool stuff. And mainly, actually, I think at this time, I spent a lot of time in PowerPoint, but I remember messing around with Publisher a ton. And I want to touch on the PowerPoint real quick because that's how I started making videos. And so I loved Bionicle and Lego at the time. And I remember I actually have the PowerPoint file somewhere, but without the music and some of the assets, it's kind of like broken. But it was really cool because essentially I took all these images that I got off of Google of different Bionicle figures, and I downloaded music already at this point too, which I think was free anyways on the website. And I synced up the animations of these images. So one character will fly across the screen with the different music and different transitions between different pages. And I had like 12, 20 pages, and each one had a timer. And essentially I had made a music video for it. I should have posted it. Oh my gosh. I didn't even realize I could have rendered it as an MP4 or something. That would have been really cool. But I messed around with this creatively, and the fact that I was able to sync up the music with the images and the different transitions and the timings of it, each scene having like 15 seconds or whatever, I thought that's just in retrospect, I think that's really cool. And I remember messing around with Publisher a lot with making like these different assets for my company that I wanted to make. And so I used to call it Mustico. I don't know why I loved the idea of naming something close to my name, because I was always called Dusty. Fun fact, I don't like being called Dusty anymore, but I used to be called Dusty a lot. And so I called it Mustico. And that was like my first business. I sold temporary tattoos and I did other things. And then when I ever did any business classes, I always used Mustico. And as I got older, I started doing the United Living Construct stuff, which you can find the YouTube link or the blog link on this channel. But this idea of trying to create an organization, I wanted to create content to bring people into it and attract people towards that construct. And the cool thing was that I started doing blogging and podcasting through the ULC. But one thing I did, and I never released this, is that I made magazines. And I made like 3, 4, 5 issues. I think I was using Lucid Chart, whatever it's called. I can't remember the name now, but it's Lucid, I think is the name of it. It's this app that was basically like Microsoft Publisher, but just a little bit more open like Canva. And I made these magazines in there and had different sections and different layouts. And actually, I remember using Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer, and I signed up for the beta for Affinity Publisher, which was essentially their magazine version tool. I never actually ended up using it, but I probably should download that and mess around with it, because I think that, maybe going forward, that's something that set me apart. Like that could be a reason why you signed up for Poly Pro, actually, now that I think about it. Doing something along the lines of creating this cool magazine of innovation and polymaths, and here's someone that's really cool to look up to. Like, here's a dossier of a really cool polymath that I found. Or maybe like any guests that I have that month, if I have them before, or if I schedule that ahead of time, I could link up the magazine with the interview. And I just think this is a really cool idea to bring back, and it might be a creative outlet to actually get me excited to make content more again. But it's fascinating how from a young age all the way up into where I am now, I love magazines. I used to grow up reading Nintendo Power and Lego magazine. Oh my goodness. Speaking of Bionicle, these Lego magazines always came with Bionicle comics too. So I have a whole stack of them. And it's just one of those things where I collected every single one. I actually kept those Lego magazines for ages. I kept the Nintendo Power magazines for ages. And it's just one of those things where, man, like that was so much fun being able to like access that and get the Lego magazine in the mail every month, or getting the like being a part of that company as a user and getting something from them. And maybe I can give that to my Poly Pro members. Actually, I'm thinking out loud right now, but it's just, it makes me happy and nostalgic for that time. Thank you for listening.